Greece is back at the top of the world's news agenda, with a referendum this Sunday on whether or not to accept further austerity measures linked to the country's ongoing debt. But instead of arguing for more austerity, 40 social organisations across Europe have argued for the scrapping of Greece's debt and have launched an international petition to this effect. We're now going to speak to John Hillary, who's from one of those organisations, War on One, calling for the scrapping of Greece's debt. John, why do you believe Greece's debt should be scrapped?
Well, the only people who are benefiting from keeping the debt going are the bankers. They're the ones who've made a killing out of Greece's debt. But the human cost is mounting day by day. I was in Athens recently, and you can see the human tragedy that is unfolding as a result of the austerity programme and as a result of debt measures being imposed on the Greek people. That's why we believe they should say no, they should reject the terms being put on them, and the people of the world should stand up in solidarity with Greece and say, we support you, not the bankers.
Could you elaborate on this point that it's mainly been the bankers and the financial speculators who were the real beneficiaries of the bailouts? Because obviously that's something that the mainstream press doesn't really give the impression of the process of what happened over the recent months.
Absolutely, and we need to be completely clear on this. Of the money that has been handed out in the so-called bailouts, 10% has gone into the Greek economy and 90% has gone straight back to the bankers and the others, the financiers who are holding that credit. And that really is unacceptable. The idea that we are bailing out the bankers and not setting the Greek economy on the path to any further recovery, that's the truth of it. And I think it's also important to look at the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, which is one of the key institutions forcing Greece to pay these debts. The IMF has made over £1 billion in debt repayment credits, basically. In the interest it has charged to the Greek people, it is becoming richer and richer by the day. Now, the IMF is a public institution. How can that be right?
And recently, the Greek Truth Commission into the country's debt found that nation's debt was illegal, illegitimate and odious. Firstly, is this something that you agree with? And secondly, what do you think the value of such commissions is?
Well, I think it's absolutely right. And you'll see in the petition that we now have over 20,000 people signing. The first call on that is to have a proper audit which says, where does this debt really come from and what proportion of it should the Greek people be required to pay? I think it's important to have had this first step, but we need to roll it out so that there's a standing procedure. When countries get into this type of problem, they can turn to a proper process and get out of it, because this isn't the first country which has had to face this type of ruinous situation. We've had it in time and time again over the last 20 years. And we think now is the time to call an end to it, to say, yes, there should be a proper process by which countries can get out of the mire.
And your petition also calls for UN rules to deal with the government debt crisis. I think this is what you were just referring to, and that these should respect human rights. Could you elaborate a little bit on that, and what would these rules look like?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, there's no proper way for a country to go bankrupt. You know, if you're a business and you've got into trouble, you can go bankrupt, and after a certain number of years, you can resurface again. There's nothing comparable in the world of international states, and that's where you have countries being forced deeper and deeper and deeper into economic disaster. And the net effect of that is that the people of those countries end up bearing the brunt of it. You never seem to have any sharing of the pain between people and the financiers, even though for the financiers there's no real pain involved. It just means taking a haircut, as it's called, you know, having a bit of a lesser slice of the pie. So we're saying it's time to have rules which rebalances the system and says that the needs of people, the human rights of people, should take precedence over the profit-making imperative of these sort of hyper-capitalists who prey on countries which are going through these type of difficulties.
And numerous countries have had processes by which they found debt to be illegitimate, or they just refused to pay, or in the case of Germany after the Second World War, their debt was cancelled. Obviously, from a Latin America's perspective, the Ecuadorian parliament did something very similar to what the Greek parliament has done in labelling the debt odious. And in Argentina, they refused to pay their debt. And in all those circumstances, I assume the lessons were positive, and that's what you think Greece should learn from.
Absolutely right. I mean, for Argentina, they had the opportunity to be able to de-link their currency from the US dollar. And that was one of the things which enabled them to come out of recession very quickly. Now, Greece is obviously facing the very difficult question at the moment of being within the Eurozone and therefore having no flexibility in terms of its currency. Should it therefore come out of the euro and therefore give themselves a bit more of a chance of being able to refloat the economy? But I think the bigger question is this. Do we want to see a future where countries are tied in to being dragged down and down and down simply because they have no leeway to be able to get out of the mess? Or do we want to see a new future where countries get to right their economies to be able to say, look, that's been a disastrous episode, but now we want to come out of it and rebuild for the people of this country? And that's what it boils down to. Are the economies of our states set to serve people's interests and people's needs, or are they just set up as profit-making playgrounds for the big capitalists?
And obviously, this very, very big battle Greece is involved in as a state, taking on the IMF, the European Central Bank and others. What role do you think that citizens' initiatives such as yours, the Petition, can play, given how powerful these forces are?
Well, firstly, it sends a very strong message of solidarity to the Greek people, saying that we stand with them, and in the referendum coming up, we would support anything that they say to say, no, we don't wish to abide by the rules of the game as dictated by the Troika, the European Commission, the European Central Bank and the IMF. But really, I think the time has come for us to stand up to those bodies, to stand up to the European Commission, the unelected, unaccountable European Commission. What possible right do these bureaucrats in Brussels have to dictate to the Greek people, the sovereign Greek people, what type of future they will have? And what right does the IMF have, which is just funded by public money? Yes, it was set up to discipline the capitalist world economy, but surely not at the expense of all of the people in it. So these are the sort of questions we need to ask of these institutions. And we need to build a movement which rejects this form of hypercapitalism. We've just got to say, we don't believe in it. It cannot be the future of our world in the 21st century. Let's get rid of the institutions unless they can come up with a far, far better plan.
Thank you very much, John Hillary.
Thank you.